Hello, this is Lien. I'm going to present to you the analysis of the filmed lessons. First of all, we're going to have a look at motivation. What is motivation? When can we tell we've got motivated students in the classroom? And motivation is the motivation of this whole research. Then we're going to have a look at the research with its research questions and the data we assembled. Then we'll turn to the analysis, draw some conclusions from it all, and give some pieces of advice. When can we tell we've got motivated students in the classroom? Most of us say that is when we've got students raising hands to answer the questions we ask them, students being dedicated to the tasks they are given, making exercises attentively, taking notes of what you say, happy students overall. When can we tell there's a lack of motivation in the classroom? That is when students start staring out of the window, grab their mobile phones, when there's no willingness to answer your questions, when students take a look at the clock to see what time it is, how long is it till the bell rings, passing on papers, and so on and so forth. You know this body language. We all recognize it as body language telling us there is no motivation anymore. And we've got ourselves a situation because this is a graph resulting from the research, and seems that most students often show a lack of motivation. And for the research, we've been asking ourselves a few questions, and we asked ourselves the question, what are possible factors affecting students' motivation? We thought of three main factors, which are the lessons, the students themselves, and the teachers. As for the lessons, we thought of the subjects being an important factor, the activities done in the lessons, and the materials used. As for the students, we considered their age and their gender, and also the class group they're in, the size of it, and the ratio of boys to girls. And as for the teachers, we considered their age, their gender, and their background. This question was asked to the observers of the filmed lessons as well, and they were asked the question, could you define a reason for the lack of motivation? Turns out that the exercises done in the lessons are quite an important factor. The type of the exercises done and the duration of the exercises are quite important, as well as the subject of the lesson, and also the lesson time is a factor we should take into consideration. But there are also other things that have their effects on motivation. We've done research over 75 lessons in our 4 schools. And we assembled data about the lessons, the subjects and subject level. We assembled data about the students, the year they're in, the level of education, the number of students in the class they're in, the ratio of boys to girls of the class, and also other distinct characteristics of the class or individual students. As for the teachers, we assembled data about their age, their gender, the main subjects they're teaching, and the main education level they're teaching in. We asked the observers for a first impression about the lesson, to note down the main activities of the lesson, to decide about the ratio of lecture style teaching to participatory learning of the lesson, and the technology that's used. We also asked them to analyze the motivation in the lessons, to note down some notable distinct behavior of the students showing motivation and of students showing little or no motivation. We asked them to give a general score for motivation, to try to define the frequency of motivational dips, to find reasons for the lack of motivation, and to note down some measures to improve motivation. As for the lesson details, we agreed on filming lessons of various subjects such as sciences, economics, and so on. As you can see from this graph, for most subjects there is a wide range of research material. And per subject there is also fair variation of levels. Now per factor we're going to analyze the data immediately as far as motivation is concerned. The top subject by the general score for motivation is computer science. Bottom subjects are mathematics and economics. So computer science renders most motivation, whereas classes in mathematics and economics seem to have the least motivated pupils. That's a conclusion we can draw from these data. Now about the students. We assembled information about the age groups, and most lessons had students of the age of 14 to 16 or 16 to 18. Only a few classes had age groups 12 to 14, and let's say a marginal part of them was older than 18. We also took a look at the number of the students per class. Most class groups are quite large, from 20 to 25 and even 25 to 30 students in a class. Smaller half of the classes we observed had smaller class groups with 15 to 20 or even 5 to 10 or 10 to 15 students. What does the number of the students per class do with the motivation in the classroom? First, we compared the number of the students in the class per school. Seems that the Czech school has most students per class, 25 to 30. The Polish school has class groups mostly of 20 to 25 students. In Gulden Sporen College in Kortrijk, the Belgian school, we've got class groups of 10 to 15 students mostly, and IMS, the Cypriot school, has class groups of 5 to 10 students. What does the size of the class group do with motivation in the class? We had a look at the average of the general score for motivation, and in classes of 25 to 30 and of 20 to 25 students it gives us an average score of 2.8 out of 5. In classes of 10 to 15 students it gives us a 3.5 out of 5, and in classes of 5 to 10 students it gives us a 4. So class groups of 5 to 10 students seem to be most effective in keeping students motivated. We also had a look at the ratio of girls to boys. Seems that most classes are well mixed groups. We also have quite a lot of classes that have more boys than girls. And if we take a look at the average general score for motivation, we see that if the ratio is 2, we get a score of 3 out of 5. If the ratio is 3 as well. If the ratio is 4, then we've got a score of 3.4 out of 5. If the ratio is 5, we've got a score of 1 to 5. There were no all girls classes, so we have no idea about that. But all boys classes seem to be the least motivated groups. As soon as there are some girls in the class, motivation seems to increase. Other characteristics related to the students tell us that, for example, for mathematics, it was often mentioned what program the students were in. An 8-hour program, a program of 8 hours of mathematics a week or a program of only 4 hours of mathematics a week, but it seems to make no difference in a general score for motivation. Once was mentioned that elementary students are keen on learning new things. That's the general idea we have. Still, the average score for motivation in elementary classes only gives us a 3 out of 5, whereas with advanced classes it gives us 3.5 out of 5. So it seems to be not completely true, that general idea. Now let's have a look at the teachers and the data we assembled about them. Of the teachers observed, most of them were 35 or are 35 to 50 years old. Yeah, we've got a smaller group of 50 to 65 years old and an even smaller group of 20 to 35 years old. Most of the teachers were female, but we also have a fairly large group of male teachers. If we analyze the data assembled about the teachers, we see that all age groups score an average of 3 out of 5. Both genders score an average of 3 out of 5. We can conclude that age nor gender makes a difference. Only 2 teachers taught a course different from their main subjects, and all were used to teaching the school level of the class observed, so most teachers were teaching in their comfort zone. The lessons then. This is a graph showing the main activities during the lesson. Top activity, lectures, and least done is tutoring, and class carousel has never been done in the filmed lessons, or hasn't been done in none of the lessons. We analyzed the activities and the impact on motivation, and the average general score for motivation versus the main activities during the lesson gives us this graph showing that experiments render most motivation and lectures and tutoring least. This is a graph showing the average general score for motivation versus the ratio lecture style teaching to participatory learning. This graph clearly shows that participatory learning renders most motivation. Now both graphs clearly show that participatory learning generates higher motivation than lecture style teaching. Still, more than half of the lessons were mainly lecture style. We also asked for the use of technology in class and what was used in the lessons observed. Videos were often used, audio as well, but computers were most used, and motivation is relatively high with the use of technology. So if we take a good look at all conclusions, we can say that computer science seems to be the most motivating subject. Class groups of 5 to 10 students seem to be most effective in keeping students motivated. All boys classes are not a good idea. As soon as there are some girls in the class, motivation increases. So we should try to have mixed gender class groups. A teacher's age or gender makes no difference. Participatory learning generates higher motivation than lecture-style teaching, and motivation is relatively high with use of technology. It brings us to this advice. We asked for the observers to note down some tips for measures, and the analysis also results in some advice, some notes to ourselves, and this is a list of it. We should give students more time to take notes. We should organize more practice, and the pieces of advice that are mentioned in red also result from the analysis. what is in black are tips given from the observers. One of the observers mentioned that we should use topics everybody is interested in, that we should or could set goals to achieve. Maybe we should tell them there's something to win when we give them some activity to do, or we should make use of progress trackers. It's also an idea. Both from the questionnaire and the analysis is the advice to use other methods in teaching. Co-teaching is an example. Have more varied activities, use more input from students, try to have more participatory learning in our lessons. One observer mentioned the fact that when we have tutoring in the lessons, that we tend to lose the attention of the other pupils. We should try not to have this effect in class. We should be involved teachers, and the use of technology is an important factor in for motivation. An example was given of a teacher asking students to come closer to take a look at a picture. A piece of advice that was given by one of the observers was better start from the bottom, hand out prints, or even use iPads with the painting on it, and use the students' input in that way. And you can use technology for that. There are some very interesting tools you can use for that, other than working with question-answer method. We could also organize the classroom differently. We should think of having mixed gender classes for sure. We should try to have small classes. 5 to 10 students is, let's say the best. But it's something we should strive for. And we could also think of a different setup of the classrooms. Now, Marike will give you the example of a classroom that is started in one of the newer buildings in school. That is when students don't have to sit down, but can take lessons in a stand-up classroom. That is an example of thinking of different setups of classrooms. Classrooms in which we can sit in a circle with easily movable chairs and seats and desks, so we can organize the classroom differently. Thanks for listening. Over to you again.